Hello and welcome back to another video in the server-side Swift using Vapor series. So in the last video we set up a relationship between the element and the alloy class. We linked them using a siblings relationship, but this isn't very useful unless we can view these relationships. So Fluent provides a function that will allow us to query these relationships, and that's what we are going to do in this video. So we'll be using a similar approach like we did in the parent-child relationship query function. So let's open up elements controller.swift file, and at the end of this file we'll just create a new function. So this function will essentially define a route handler, which is called getAlloysHandler, and this will return a futures array of alloy. So basically we're using this function to return all the alloys that this particular element is a part of. So let's just register this new handler at the end of our boot file up here. And we'll create this request on the alloys path. Right. So similarly, let's create this kind of a request for our alloys file. So let's just go to alloy.swift file, and down here we can just add an extension and define the sibling relationship that we defined in the elements file. So this will set up Fluent's sibling function and retrieve all the elements for this particular alloy class. And similarly, we can create a new handler in the alloys controller.swift file. So at the end of the alloys controller.swift file, let's create a new function. So similarly, this function will be used to query all the elements of the periodic table from our alloys class. Let's register this new root handler in our boot function. And we'll put this on the elements path. Great. So we can go ahead and build and run our application. And we can test out the new APIs in the Postman app. So I'll just copy the address from here, and I'll add the endpoints, which are API/alloys/1 for the ID of the alloy and elements. So this will basically list all the elements which are siblings for this particular alloy. Now let's get back to our project and let's see how we can remove a relationship. So removing a relationship between the periodic table element and an alloy is very similar to adding the relationship. So first we'll open up elements controller.swift file, and at the bottom of this file we'll just create a new function which will be used to remove the relationship. So here we have created another API request which will return the HTTP status, and inside this function we are taking the parameters of the periodic table element and the alloy, and we're using the detach method to detach this particular alloy from this element, and eventually we're transforming the result into a HTTP status which is no content. So let's finally register this new API into our boot function. And here we'll make the delete request. So let's go ahead and try this new method out in our Postman app. And I'll just copy this address and add the endpoints, which are API/element / the element ID, which is 1, and alloy, because we've said the alloy is here, and after this the alloy ID, which is set as 1, and I'll set this request as a delete request and send. Okay, so this is giving us the 204 no content HTTP status. So that means this API is working perfectly. Now, like we did with the parent-child relationship, let's set up a foreign key constraint to this, because it's a good practice to use the foreign key constraint even with the sibling relationships. So the current element alloys pivot file does not check the IDs for the elements and the alloys. So at this point we can delete the elements and the alloys that are still linked by the pivot, and the relationship will remain without flagging any error. So let's fix that by creating a foreign key constraint here. So I'll delete the migration conformance and create a new extension down here. And inside this I'll override the prepare function. So what this new migration will do is it will conform to the migration protocol first, and then we are implementing a prepare function which will override the default implementation of the prepare on function. And we are creating a table for the elements alloy pivot in the database, and then we are using the add properties function to add all the fields to our database. And down here we are creating a reference between the element ID and the periodic table class ID. So this will set up the foreign key constraint, and this .cascade function refers to the cascade scheme reference action when you delete the acronym. This means that the relationship will automatically be removed instead of an error being thrown. Similarly, we're doing the same for the alloy ID and the alloy class. So before we can test this out, we have to remove our database and create the Docker database again. So let's open up terminal for that, and we can change the directory to our projects folder. And then we can just write the command docker stop Postgres to stop this database. And then we can just remove this database. And now we'll use this command to recreate the database. So I had mentioned about how we can set up the database in the video about configuring the database, so make sure you check that out. And after this is done, we can just recreate our Xcode project. Great, and now we can go ahead and keep the Xcode version and run this application. And now we can just test out the new changes in Postman app. And now that we have recreated our whole database, we'll have to create a new user, new elements, and new alloys altogether. So make sure you do that before testing out the siblings query function. And that's it for this video. In this video, I showed you how we can query the siblings relationship function and how we can remove a relationship from our Vapor database. So thank you so much for watching, and make sure you subscribe for regular SwiftUI content. Thank you.